Welcome to Be Provided Conservation Radio, sharing stories and information about the environment, wildlife, and the people who are dedicating their lives to protect the world for future generations. These inspirational stories will take you from the Santa Cruz Mountains to remote areas of Africa. Here are your hosts.
Hello everyone, welcome to Be Provided Conservation Radio. I am Marcia Civic and your host today. Today we are concluding our conversation with Dr. Rodney Jackson about snow leopards and the Snow Leopard Conservancy, which he founded approximately 30 years ago. So if you have not had a chance to listen to part one, you can go to iTunes and download it right now. In part one, Rodney shared his background and his roots, as well as how he began the Snow Leopard Conservancy and the snow leopard and getting involved with snow leopard conservation. If you want to learn more about Rodney and the snow leopards, you can visit www.snowleopardconservancy.org to learn more. So in today's episode, Rodney begins right off with the challenges these cats are facing, and we get into a discussion about the Snow Leopard Conservancy and how it has been able to successfully address these challenges. Rodney also shares what gives him hope for the future of snow leopards and other wildlife. So enjoy today's episode and please check out part one if you haven't already. Rodney's got a great, fun and inspirational story, and I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it. Here we go. What challenges are snow leopards facing? You mentioned briefly just now, getting into a goat pen. I'm sure that's a challenge as well. But what are they facing due to the decline? Yeah,
a number of threats. I would put high on the list human-wildlife conflict, and it definitely comes about because of the depletion of the wild natural prey base of snow leopards, the blue sheep, the ibex, even some of the smaller mammals, hares and so on.
Are those because people are hunting them too, or
people are? They're often outsiders. They may not necessarily be the local people, but the prey base has been hunted. It has been depleted. More significantly, I think, is that the number of livestock has increased dramatically. For example, in Mongolia, since getting into their independence and from the Soviet era, the number of livestock has increased by threefold or more, and essentially the rangeland is overstocked. The domestic livestock have eaten up all the forage. There's very little for wild prey that are pushed to the higher levels, so the snow leopard is increasingly in contact with humans. Those livestock represent the cash in the bank for the families. And, if they lose one or two, let alone 5 or 10 that happens in a multiple killing incident, they are extremely angry, and it leads to retributive poisoning or killing of snow leopards. And that's a big threat.
Yeah. So they have pens, it sounds like, that they keep their livestock in, or are these free-ranging livestock like you see in parts of Africa, I guess?
Some are free range. In large animals like yaks and horses are difficult to pen, and they're free ranging, but they generally are predated upon much less than the small bodied like sheep and goats. So sheep and goats are brought back to the livestock owner's home or their pasture camp at nighttime, and they penned in a poorly constructed corral made out of stones, just a stone wall that can be easily negotiated by a snow leopard. The goats or sheep can't get out that easily, and it's an artificial situation where the cat gets in there, the prey can't escape, and the cat's killing instinct gets repeatedly triggered, so it attacks anything that moves around it until there's no movement.
Right.
And when the herder comes back in the morning, or sleeps heavily and is not woken up by all of this stuff going on, all they see are 10 up to 80 sheep and goats that are lying dead or mortally wounded on the ground, and they all have these throat, or mostly throat bites, but some nape bites. And the local herd is convinced the snow leopard's a bloodsucker. It's a vampire that's, just wants the blood of our livestock. And so naturally they see the cat as a pest to be killed and hunted no matter what.
Wow. Yeah, it's hard. That's their whole livelihood gone in one night like that.
It is. Unfortunately, it can be prevented. A very simple technique, of course, is to make sure that livestock pen has been predator-proofed so that the cat cannot get in it. And once you've done that, you've eliminated this problem of multiple losses overnight, and immediately the herders are far more willing to coexist with the predator if they don't suffer losses.
Mm-hmm. Is that something that you with the Snow Leopard Conservancy have helped with some of these farmers and for predator proofing their corrals?
Yes, it is indeed, and it's actually one of the first things we did back in the late 90s, early part of this century, is we worked with villagers to predator-proof their corrals. They would provide, the materials that are locally available, like stone and mud for making a good wall, and we would provide the materials that had to be brought in, a wire mesh to put over the corral so there's a roof. Cats, snow leopards are wonderful jumpers.
I bet.
They could literally jump from a standing position up 12 feet or something like that.
Oh my
10
gosh.
feet, certainly, with no trouble.
Yeah.
And of course, it's hard to make a wall 15, 20 feet high. But what you can do is get poles for roof supports, and over that you can put a wire mesh that the cat can get up there and look down, but it's not going to get in. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what we do through, collaborative efforts with the villagers so that they can feel valued, that they're providing labor, materials, part of the solution.
Right.
And we are providing things that they just don't have access to or the cash.
Wow. It sounds like they're pretty willing to be a part of this, to do this. That's good.
They are, and we use a very participatory means of engaging them, something we call Appa. Appa in Ladakhi and Tibetan is grandfather, actually. So local people have a great respect for the elders. Mm-hmm. The elders are a source of knowledge, and, they've lived in snow leopard areas forever. So it just helps build a level of trust between us and the local herders, and together we can go through the scenario of what the threats are, what threats can be mitigated, what threats are harder to do. So we always want to encourage them to guard their animals better than they have done in the past or are doing nowadays. And one of the challenges is they send their kids out to tend the livestock, the sheep and goats.
Wow.
And of course, in the modern world, every parent wants a better future for their kid, and herding may not be that. Their kids need to go to school, so they need money to send them to school. They need to find somebody else to look after the livestock. So that part of the problem is often the livestock's just pushed out without any guard, and they learn to come back on their own.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that's a challenge.
Yeah. So how has it been fairly successful though, since you've been implementing this? Have you?
It's been very successful in that, it's curbed and stopped retributive killing right off the bat.
Oh, good.
However, we do still realize that, those families are living on the edge. They don't have a lot of cash. The economy, instead of being a barter exchange economy, has moved towards a cash economy, subject to inflation and all the forces from outside of these herding areas that they really can't compete with very well. So the other thing that we do in tandem with corral predator proofing is to work on ways of improving their income sources.
Oh, smart.
Their livelihood. Mm-hmm. And in Ladakh, again, the sort of pioneering technique that now is being applied in many, many areas of India, certainly, and increasingly Nepal and even Mongolia, is something called a traditional homestay. And it was not our idea. It was actually the idea of the village woman who said, well, we have these fairly big Tibetan houses. We can put a spare room set aside. We could, put up a guest and do a bed and breakfast operation.
Nice.
You train us on, hygiene and how to service and a bit on language so we can communicate with the guests coming into this area. And it's a national park, and, people want to trek through there. They want to see the culture. They want to see the wildlife. And so it was the best of two worlds, because by bringing people in, giving them an opportunity for a bed and breakfast homestay, one night they generate something like $10 to $15 for the household that hosted the stay. Mm-hmm. Their responsibility to provide 3 very simple meals of traditional food, not a foreign food,
right?
And to have the guests sit in their main living room, so where they cook and they eat, so they could just see how people live. They could talk about the culture. Those people would bring their own sleeping bag, but they would have a nice clean room with a bed and a mattress that they could go to sleep at night, and a little wood stove heater or dung heat. What was it? A horse dung heater to keep the room warm.
Nice.
And so it's a win-win.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that sounds great. Wow. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
It was great. It was wonderful. You're absolutely right. It was really great. But what it did is unexpected to me. I didn't expect this to happen, but it suddenly changed the way people and snow leopards reacted to one another. So instead of people, whenever they saw a snow leopard, as they often would do, walking up to the village along the trail, they would just shout at it and throw rocks, and get out of here. And suddenly we were placing a lot of educational activity. We say, hey, treat this animal as an asset. It's going to bring you money, but it's only going to bring you money if people can see it. And if people see it more, you're going to get more and more people. And so they haven't arrested it. And from a situation where, in our study, we would see the cats maybe 2-3 times a year, and we're there for much of the year.
Right.
To a situation now, after the homestays, after the corral predator proofing, I can go out and in 10 days, I can see 7 different snow leopards. And in a few cases, I can be 50 yards from them all day.
Oh, my gosh.
They're not troubled, They'll stay there as long as you don't go closer than 50 yards.
Wow.
And I have no doubt that is due to this situation of, I guess it's a very good coexistence between humans and a large predator.
Right.
And they both feel, comfort with one another.
Right. They've reached an understanding. That's great.
Yeah, there's an understanding. Yeah. They're sharing the habitat. And this is truly, I think, community-based stewardship in practice.
That's wonderful. Wow. Well, that's good to hear because, you hear so many bad human-wildlife relationship stories. It's good to hear this is working. And I was just going to ask, what other challenges are leopards facing? Is there still a threat for the pet trade or fur trade or anything like that going on these days?
Yes, there is. The demand for snow leopard fur, probably more snow leopard bones and body parts, certain organs like kidneys and heart and so on, has increased in large part because of the demand from East Asians, and the Chinese medicinal trade is very active, and with China being such an increasingly affluent and large nation, and with having a history of remedies from rare animals that dates back thousands of years, but was really only utilized or accessed by the nobility. It's now available to the masses who have money, and of course, that the demand, the supply cannot possibly meet the demand, and we're losing the large cats, including lions and tigers, leopards, all because of this. So this is a serious threat.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
And we do need education of, the next generation of Chinese so that they realize what the impact is of consuming bones of a tiger in tiger wine or however they have it.
Mm-hmm.
The other big threat that's an emerging one, I don't know how it's going to play out, but I think it could be potentially very serious. And that relates to just basic industrialization and infrastructure development. So across what was formerly a very sparsely populated or rarely visited area, like the Tibetan Plateau, it's about 14,000 feet, so it's hard for people to live there.
Yeah.
Now you're having roads penetrating it. There's mining claims going on for gold and rare minerals that have been accessed. China has a massive program called the One Road, One Belt Initiative. And the idea here is to connect mainland China, especially Beijing and the lowland industrial cities, more directly with Europe, the markets for products.
Wow.
By rail, mostly by rail. I mean, there are roads, but rail is really the big, high-speed rail is a big thing. And also to have rail and road access to the Gulf because of oil and natural gas pipelines coming in. And for the development of China, obviously. So those are already beginning to bifurcate snow leopard habitat. And as we know, in a species that's pretty sparsely populated, you need a large amount of real estate to maintain a viable population. And if you break it up into smaller and smaller pieces, at some point it's just going to become non-functional.
Right, right. How many snow leopards exist right now, do you think? It may be hard to say, but I'm sure.
Well, this is a very controversial aspect.
Oh, okay.
We don't know because it's so hard to survey them. It takes a huge amount of resources, a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe they are somewhere between about 3,500, maybe 4,000, up to maybe even 7,000 of them, spread over 12 countries over a vast area that's about the size of the western U.S. So it's a massive area with very little difficult access and hard to count.
Yeah.
And scientists were actually, recently there was a evaluation done of the endangered status of snow leopard based on IUCN's system, the Red List. And the Red List has a standardized protocol that you follow to classify which category an animal most likely falls within. And a team was put together, 2 teams actually, were put together recently to do this analysis. And using their criteria, when we did it, we really realized that probably the snow leopard was not in the endangered category, but fell more into the vulnerable category. And it's up to scientific reviewers and also the management authority of the Red List, which is IUCN, a recognized international body that looks after ecosystems and wildlife globally. They evaluated the process that we use and the criteria, and they had to agree that probably it should be delisted, and that was downlisted a little bit. And so it came down to vulnerable last year, which doesn't mean it's not at risk of extinction. It is. It's just at a lower level now. We still got to act. We still got to deal with the threats. We still got to protect it. And what I worry about is all the scientists and everybody are concerned about, well, how many snow leopards there, how many there. They put in huge amounts of resources into the camera trapping of it and trying to find it out. And meantime, we have in villages being impacted by snow leopards and other predators, losing their livestock,
right,
getting more disgruntled and being less willing to coexist with predators. And I really worry that unless we ramp up immediately, very quickly, our conservation action initiatives, we could lose them. And once we've lost their trust, it'll be very, very hard to get it back.
Oh, I can imagine. And then they're dealing with, like you said, this infrastructure coming in for mining and extraction. And, that's got to be disheartening to some of those smaller villages, too.
Well, so, some of them, of course, look at jobs. But
well, yeah, that's true. Money and income. Yeah.
Dealing with those things is obviously a whole different level. You're dealing at a higher level, governmental level, and a private sector level. They're definitely going to be a challenge, but there are ways you can mitigate these. You can have overpasses, underpasses. I think in snow leopard habitat itself, because it's so mountainous, and given that the main system of transportation that China's looking at are railroads. Obviously, you can carry more freight on a railroad than you can on trucks over these long distances. There are going to be a lot of tunnels, and wherever there's a tunnel, then clearly you've got a natural, overpass. Yeah. So I think it can be mitigated. I don't know, but the one thing that is not going to be mitigated, however, is also another very serious thing, not restricted to the U.S., is a border fence. And there are existing right now border fences between China and Mongolia, more or less continuous along, probably must be, at least 1,000 miles of border, or close to 1,000 miles of border.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize.
And also between other countries. So those have already separated snow leopards into two separate populations that have diverged genetically anyway, because there's no natural continuity between the two of them. Cats have to cross pretty wide open level plains areas, and relatively few of them, I think, are able to cross that
long distance.
It's a relatively long distance. In kilometers, it amounts to about 600-700 kilometers, which is about 350-400 miles, somewhere in that range.
Wow. Yeah. So what are some things that people can do, or Snow Leopard Conservancy can do to help or get involved with some of these things that you're talking about, some of these challenges? It sounds like education on infrastructure and such is a good thing too, but
education certainly. The schools in this part of the world are very poorly supported by government. I mean, they often don't have desks, don't have chairs, don't have writing materials. So, supporting international education, school development programs would be a good thing. Providing funding for conservation action to groups like Snow Leopard Conservancy or the Snow Leopard Trust or Panthera. There's a number of groups out there that are doing the corral predator proofing and the improvement of livelihoods, and having livestock insurance programs run by the local herders, etc. Supporting conservation organizations is really a critical need, because we realize that most of the support, understandably, that comes from North America is invested in North America, and it's hard for people to get their heads around, an animal that lives on the other side of the world, or a place they've never heard the name of.
Right.
But I would hope that, I guess I go back to somebody, when I was first coming to the U.S., back in the late 60s, I grew up at a formative stage when John F. Kennedy was there, and I'll never forget his call for it's not what your country can do for you, but it's what you can do for your country. And I kind of flip it around a little bit and say, well, animals, we depend a lot on animals for comfort, for having them around, but, they depend on us too. And we kind of have to make sure they have a safe home for the wild ones, not only our pets, valued pets at home, but there are these wild creatures out there that have every right to exist as well.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I try to get listeners involved, people who may not have heard of the Snow Leopard Conservancy or snow leopards. Maybe this will pique their interest to look it up and say, wow, this is amazing. I want to help in some way, shape, or form.
Right. And contact us on our website. People often ask us, how can they volunteer for us? Well, it's difficult for us because we don't have many volunteering jobs. We have things in the office that they could do, help with mailings and so on. But, they would have to. People would have to live fairly close to Sonoma. Our goal is to build a capacity for the range country people to do it. And so more and more, we are discouraging foreigners from going over there and doing the research, doing the conservation. It needs to be done by locals.
Yeah.
We need to provide them with, technical assistance, of course, when it's needed, and funding. Funding is a big issue for them because they don't have, as we have, a fairly sophisticated, tax system where giving money to conservation leads to tax benefits for the individuals. They have none of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big thing, and that's important to think of getting them going in these initiatives. Speaking of funding, before I forget, I also wanted to congratulate you on the Darwin Initiative. The Snow Leopard Conservancy was just awarded the Darwin Initiative grant, and I think that will help with some funding, if I'm correct.
Thank you. Yes, it certainly will. It's
that's
a
an honor.
2.5-year project, and it's a significant amount of funding. And we were one of very few international organizations out of the UK awarded it. So it's for an interesting challenge, and it's related to this changes, economic and political changes that are sweeping much of the world. Nepal was a monarchy. The monarchy has recently gone to, a federal system of more equal representation. And then under the new monarchy, the focus is on decentralizing some of the powers and the funding resources. And so what we are going to use the grant for is at the municipality level. This is a real local level. Increasingly, they are being asked to protect snow leopards and other biodiversity, but they don't always have the knowledge, the tools, or the resources to do so. And this grant will enable us to work with women's associations, village women's associations, with herder associations, with forest groups, to help build up their ability to attract government funding. And we're going to do that by helping them develop business plans that are enterprise related that will, I hope, lead to more friendly and sustainable environmental practices, and that will have at the sort of keystone of everything, protection of the snow leopard and its ecosystem.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, congratulations on that. And that's exactly what you were just saying before I mentioned the Darwin, to get funding for these local areas, local communities.
Right.
Yeah.
For the local communities. And I think Darwin, having got this grant, it also positions us well for getting co-financing from other foundations, because obviously Darwin's not able to cover everything, and there are a lot of other related issues that we should be addressing. So one thing we're looking into with a partner from Austria, actually, is into this idea of designating special trails for trekkers to go on, whereby the fee that they would pay to have a guide, there would be a local guide, there'd be visits to local families, but the resources, the funding they would leave behind would be used to sustain the livelihoods, the traditional livelihoods in that area that make it so unique right now.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, I could talk to you for a very long time, and I know you're a very busy person with all this going on, but I have one more question for you if you have time.
Uh-huh. Absolutely,
and this might be a heavy question, but I ask everyone, so what gives you the most hope? We're bombarded so much with negative news every day, and I'm trying to share some good, hopeful stories. So what gives you hope?
What gives me hope, I guess, is the next generation, the youth that we are emerging this day here in the U.S., in Nepal, in Mongolia, in Pakistan, places that have had, difficult last decades, I guess. Mm-hmm. I think we've got some passionate, committed youngsters coming up that really want to make a difference, that really want to protect wildlife, that are not just interested in making money, as much money as they can, that want to give back. What I want to focus on in my last years of professional life now, because I'm in my early 70s, and I figure I got another 10, maybe 12 years or something that I can really get out and do something, is to mentor these youths and, share my experience with them, help them become more effective at what they do and help them raise money and all of that. And of course, to do that, I need some resources. So I'm really looking for people that can help me get overseas and be able to spend the time. And so we can replace for SLC that's managing the general programs, we can go out and hire a program officer that'll be able to do that for us. So free up my time, in other words.
Right. Oh, that'd be wonderful. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that would, that would be it. And I realize we have some advantages. One advantage we have is that much of the Snow Leopards range is covered by people who are Buddhists, and they have a natural level of compassion for other living creatures. And we just got to really build on that, I think, and strengthen traditional knowledge and bring back some of the respect and awe that traditional people had in the past and still have buried down there for, wild animals. And one program we are working on is Land of the Snow Leopard. It's more in Central Asia, up in Russia, in Mongolia, in Kyrgyzstan, and those surrounding areas. But it builds on totem animals and myths and beliefs that people have about the role of different wildlife species. So totem animals are really the defenders. Their welfare is required in order for the community's welfare to be assured as well. And hunting something can bring catastrophe upon families, and they know that. They've seen stories of that. Well, we need to make sure that those traditions and those values are continued.
Oh, yeah. And it comes with that younger generation, too. Yeah, to keep them involved with what their elders are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're losing traditional knowledge. Local people don't have a role in, or very little role in deciding what conservation actions should be taken and why. And frankly, I think they have an equal reason to be at the table as a scientist does, because they bring, hundreds of years of knowledge about living in a difficult area where the scientist certainly has never lived or stays for a few months. And it's the culture that's going to sustain the environment over the long term as well.
Yeah.
And this is something my wife is working on really well. We got a grant from DiCaprio to look into this and to set up a network of shamans and sacred site guardians that can be the eyes and the ears locally, and hopefully can report back to the centralized government system that can, actually go out and if there are poachers involved, arrest the poachers, take them to trial, to court.
Yeah,
because clearly a local person can't do that. It's very difficult for them to do that, but they can be citizen scientists, really.
Oh yeah. Well, good for Darla. I would love to talk to her more on that too at some point. Get her on the show.
Yeah, I'm sure she would be happy to talk to you about it. It's a big challenge, of course.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Definitely a challenge to get that network, and a lot of it comes down to people. Just access,
Mm-hmm.
How do you in such remote areas get the word out quickly? Because you don't have internet, and you don't always have, you have very little phone service, even mobile service. So it's a challenge on how to do it. We're trying to work with that and figure out what we can do.
Yeah. Smoke signals and stuff probably don't work either all the time.
They slow.
Especially in a mountainous region, yeah. So
yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Rodney, for all you do and all that the Snow Leopard Conservancy is doing for snow leopards. And it's been a great honor talking to you today.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
It's wonderful. I've enjoyed it, and thank you for the opportunity and for helping us spread the word. That's really the critical issue here, I think.
Yeah.
And thank you to all the listeners for what you guys do. You're an important part of the solution.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate it. So have a good day.
Okay, thank you. I will. Yes. I'm getting ready actually to go to Pakistan, so I need to go off and get prepared for that, to do some training programs over there.
Oh, wonderful. We'll have a safe trip. And
I will. Thank you.
And I'm excited to hear more what's going on. Are you going to be at the WCN this fall at all?
Yes, I'm planning to be.
Okay. Okay, great. So hopefully we'll run into each other in person there at some point. So.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully we'll. I'm hoping to bring over a villager, actually.
Oh, fun.
A guy called Tashi, who's a great photographer, but he really has, like a lot of these villages, they see snow leopards far more than any of us do. Yeah. And so, they have interesting experiences to share.
Nice. I'm actually looking at a photo of from Tashi of 3 snow leopards on your website.
Right
now.
Tashi's, he's really I want to get him a better camera, actually, than what he's got. He's looking for one of these high-end cameras. He's got a good lens. He just needs more pixel power, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
But he's out every day. That's what he's doing, and slowly habituating them as we had them in Ladakh. So hopefully Nepal will be the next place to go and see snow leopards.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that'd be exciting. Well, thank you, and safe travels, and good luck with everything you're doing.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thanks, Rodney.
And we'll stay in touch.
Oh, I hope so. I'll let you know when everything is ready to go.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Be Provided Conservation Radio. Links and resources to today's topic are in our show notes on iTunes. We appreciate your dedication and interest in protecting our natural world for future generations. If you like what you heard, please get involved by volunteering, donating, and sharing these podcasts with your friends. It also helps us to inform more people if you take a minute to leave a rating or review on iTunes. Have a great day, and thank you for listening to Be Provided Conservation Radio.